Welcome in to 19 on the Clock, your Tri-State High School and College Sports Podcast. I am your host, Brad Pushkar. Joining me as always is my co-host, Jackson McCarty.
Yeah, and so I was going to possibly just pretend that he's not here, but when you have not only one of the best sports anchors in the Tri-State, personally, maybe the best sports anchor I've ever worked with, very talented man, exceptional on the drums, just all around a beast of nature, Jeremy Rauch. What's going on, buddy?
Yes, beast of nature is how I've often been described. 5'11" and 3/4, 176 pounds, dad bod.
But he'll meet you in the A gap.
Hey, look, listen, I'm coming for you. You know, we're playing pickup basketball. I'm jacking threes in your face all day. I don't make a lot of them,
no,
but I'm coming for you. You know what I mean? I want the ball in my hands. No, this is great. You're too kind. Drumming is my first love. I think a lot of people that I meet are. At least in Cincinnati in the last 11 to 12 years, are surprised by that because they see me on TV or know me from covering sports or whatever it is. I really wanted to go into music. I have a friend who's a wonderful music producer in Nashville, Jordan Sapp, who I grew up with, played in a band with, and another guy who went a different way into being a pastor for a church. But nonetheless, I wanted that to be my career, and it came to a hard conversation with my now wife where it was like, both of these careers make no money, and her parents, right? So I want to pursue drums and music, which will make possibly no money, or local TV, which will possibly make no money.
Yeah.
Which one do you think I should do? And she's like, well, you went to college for TV, so why don't you stick with that one? And thankfully, it has worked out. But yes, drumming is still my first love, I would say.
Hey, and you've fulfilled that dream to a pretty high standard, at least on the Sundays at Mount Carmel Christian that I've been part of.
It has worked out. I've been able to play consistently at least once a month, every stop of the way. Whatever my TV job is, I play drums in church. People always think like, oh, you play old hymns? Do you just kind of like tap it lightly with brushes? Like, Jackson, you've been there.
Oh,
we get after it a little bit.
It is a concert, dude. It is a genuine experience that I encourage anybody to check out. I know they've got YouTube streams where they'll get like the close cam on you too.
I appreciate that. Sometimes I will wink at the camera. Let's just like, hey, who's watching? You know,
you do a little.
Stick twirl?
Yeah.
Do a little paradiddle.
I set the cymbals on fire one Sunday, and our pastor was like, let's not do that anymore. A couple of old ladies died that week. No, I'm kidding.
In Motley Crue, whenever they do the spinning wheel.
That would be sick. So I've been to concerts like that where they flip the drummer. Now, I do get motion sickness, so if I yak while I'm doing a drum solo upside down, the experience is lessened massively.
But more impressive. If you just keep going.
Wait, this is the podcast experience with me.
Yes.
You're like diving in head first.
Yeah. Yes. And I do promise we have a purpose to being here today. So basically, as you guys know, the high school and college seasons across the board have just completed.
Yep.
We want to take some time to look back all the way through the seasons. Brad and I have picked 3 or 4 teams each of teams that we want to highlight, and we're going to put Jeremy on the spot because he has to pick who the most impressive season from the Tri-State was during the schedule.
Yes, and I know that I ranked mine,
yes,
including an honorable mention that I felt we had to include, but I'm focused solely on the local colleges, and then you are looking at all of the high school sports. So you had a much harder.
Yes.
You at least had more to pick from, but a harder decision to make.
Well, and I do want to shout out, like, they're not going to be mentioned, and if you want to bring them up, you feel free. But like Moeller football and Anderson football and Aiken basketball, like a lot of the teams that I had to leave off got left off because of state title winners.
Yeah.
So we have 2 of those, one in baseball who came just so close. And I'll start you with Beechwood football because to be honest, I'd find every opportunity I can to talk about football on this podcast since the season has ended. So we're going to start it off hot here. They are, of course, the 2A state champions of this year. They had a 216-93 tournament differential. Tournament, not, all season.
Yep.
They just were doing that. Defense had 5 shutouts last year, scored 64 times, 56 times when you expand it out. Clay Hayden was just a phenomenal quarterback, almost 3,000 yards. And then Chase Flaherty, the running back, almost 1,530 touchdowns.
Yes.
So what do you remember about the Beechwood season that kind of is going to stick in your head?
I remember on Friday nights always saying, Chase Flaherty.
Yep.
With the dumb Irish accent, because he was in the highlights all the time. You know, Beechwood has been a powerhouse in football for a long time. They were challenged a bit when they went from, 1A, Class A to 2A, but they've still continued their dominance. Doesn't matter, who the coach is. Noel Rash was a legend and did great things here. Shout out to Noel Rash. Loves the Rolling Stones, by the way. He always texts me about that for some reason. But this Beechwood football team this year was a lot of fun to watch because they were just dominant in so many ways. And I can't remember the exact game because sometimes it all runs together in my head, but it was early in the playoffs for Beechwood. And just watching the opponents, try to figure out a way to get on Beechwood's level, and they had absolutely no chance. Just the way that Beechwood plays. They can be explosive. They can ground and pound you the way they played. Obviously, you talked about, a couple of their elite players, but they just across the board were so good, so dominant. It felt like no one had a chance against them. So a great season for Beechwood. You did mention Moeller and Anderson on the Ohio side. It is a travesty that they did not win state championships. Now, Matt Ponatoski is going to get another shot. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He is essentially an all-world level athlete in high school. He is one of the best players, if not the best player in Ohio. Everyone knows his story with, baseball and football. But for them to not win it last year with that team, I thought was terrible. They'll get another shot. Anderson, the thing I hated about that one, and I don't mean to belabor this point here with teams that didn't win, but Anderson had to play in the snow, and you get that when you get up to Canton, in December. That's how it works sometimes. But Anderson's style, I think that they would have won the state championship. I think it made it that much more difficult for them playing a game in the snow. They still almost pulled it off, but those two teams, man, that hurts. But Beechwood, what a season they had.
Well, and I remember with the Anderson one, I was at the game prior to the state final. And just freezing, my fingers about to fall off. But I remember watching Justice Burnham pull out some magic right there at the end, score a touchdown. I think there was only like 48 seconds. It was a very limited amount of time, and that was still out of their comfort zone. So it did take a lot for me to leave them off specifically, just because I had such a front row seat to seeing how talented that team really was.
So are we going to go through, and should I list my favorite high school team of the year, or do you want to list them off? How do you want to do it?
I'll do all three.
Okay.
And then I just kind of wanted to take little bits of time to do all that.
Because I've got one, and I'm waiting on it.
Oh, yeah?
Okay, yeah, I've got one. All right, go ahead.
Also worth mentioning before I do this next one, I would love to see some kind of segment with you and Joe where you have texts that you've received from notable figures around Cincinnati, and the other has to try to guess who it came from.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. That would be a fun one. There's a story from years ago with Zach Taylor that would have been a notable phone call.
Oh, really? Not a podcast story?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. There we go. Podcast exclusive.
Quick aside, podcast exclusive. I don't know how many people know this. I tell this story to high schools or where I go have speaking events. I tell this story. It's a lesson that I learned in my career, and it has to do with Zach and a conversation that I had with him about John Ross. Back in 2019, John Ross was a former Bengals first-round pick that obviously didn't work out in the NFL for a lot of ways. Wasn't Zach's pick, but nonetheless. And I had some information, a conversation that I thought was for some public knowledge about John Ross and not necessarily loving football and some of his shortcomings and why it wasn't working for him with the Bengals, even under Zach Taylor's new staff. Put that out. And John Ross quote tweeted me and said, "I want to be traded right away." And that in that moment, I thought, this is not good. And Zach Taylor actually called me a few seconds later and said, "Man, what are you doing? That's a killer." Now, I think Zach understood that they weren't going to keep John Ross around, but it burned that bridge, and Zach relationally didn't want to do that. And so that was a lesson learned for me and a phone call that I didn't want to get. Yeah.
Between that and Tyler Boyd, the Bengals slot receivers, is a checkered past.
Man, when am I going to learn my lesson? I'm not getting into the Tyler Boyd thing. Anyways, I digress.
No.
That would be a fun podcast.
We could dance around that. We could absolutely avoid that one. All right, the next team I want to talk about, the Purcell Marion Cavaliers girls basketball. talking about dynasties, talking about powerhouses like we just did with Beechwood, Purcell wins 4 straight titles. D. Alexander, 3 straight Miss Ohio basketballs. Never really felt like it was ever going to be close throughout Division III, and just kept on. I think they won here I have the note. Their closest game in the playoffs was 19 points. So yeah, we don't get, I know we have a lot of very talented athletes, but we don't get people that have 3 years straight of being Mr. or Mrs. Ohio anything. So what was it like for you to kind of get to cover that over the span of 3 years?
Well, my first thought is what a gift for the Cincinnati Bearcats to have Dee Alexander and her talents staying home. There are some elite basketball programs right now. You guys obviously know. South Carolina's at the top of that list, I would think, or near it at least. They were in the mix. There are programs like Oregon. There are plenty of them where Dee Alexander could have gone and excelled. And she decided to stay in her hometown of Cincinnati. But their dominance, and why, I don't want to give too much away, but why they're probably my favorite high school team of the year, why they're up there as number one for me, is it reminds me of what the Warriors did, a la 2014 to 2018 or whatever. I guess you could say 2015 to 2018, but they did have that one loss to the Cavs. They were up 3-1 and blew it. Everyone knows the story. But outside of that, especially when they got Kevin Durant, it felt like it was unfair for the rest of the NBA. You know what I mean? That's truly, to me, the dominance that Purcell Mary displayed with Dee Alexander the last 4 years and what they were like. And I remember feeling as a Cavaliers fan in the 2018 NBA Finals where J.R. Smith didn't know time and score and he blows game 1. And I remember thinking, that is the only chance you had and you guys blew it. And I just knew going into that, even with LeBron James on that team, I knew that they were not going to stand a chance against that Warriors team with Steph Curry and Kevin Durant and Clay and Draymond, on and on and on, like a super team. So
no Iguodala mentioned. No, there's so many
exactly.
more.
We could go on and on.
Livingston, I think, was still on those rosters.
So yes, I mean, the mid-range G in the NBA. So there's so many things that I feel like in my mind, I remember that 2018 finals with the Cavs and the Warriors and just knowing this they have no chance. And that's what it felt like watching Purcell Mary in the last 3-4 years, their dominance, and Dee Alexander. It's like they had such a great team. They dominated truly like none other really has that we've seen in the Cincinnati area. So to me, that's top of the mountain right there, what Purcell and Dee Alexander accomplished.
It was just so absurd to watch. We've talked about Dee 1,000,001 times on this podcast, just because how are you supposed to avoid her?
I was going to say, and the big thing that we kind of mentioned too, that we always talked about, was it sets a culture sure, she graduates, she goes to UC, but you have juniors that know what it's like to win and want to keep that going on.
And a great head coach.
All of it. Fantastic head coach.
Yeah.
The last team we'll do for the high school side before we let you do your picks, Baden Rams of baseball. 25-7, just lost in the state semifinal to Licking Valley, but they were batting almost .350 as a team all year, had an ERA of 1.39. And then Caleb Dreisen, who we talked about, Dreisen,
yeah.
Dreisen, sorry. Yep. Had 4 earned runs all year and was leading the charge for them on the mound. An exceptional player, a junior, so we'll get him back next year. As the baseball season just wrapped up, I guess just kind of how do you feel, or how do you think Baden feels with this finish, and what do you kind of forecast for next year?
So Baden, the thing about them, let me just say first, they had an amazing season. They did lose to Licking Valley, my alma mater, by the way, who won the state championship for the first time ever. So shout out Panthers. Not that helps Baden's feelings right now.
No, but it's all right.
And I was not rooting for Licking Valley to beat Baden, just for the record.
Of course.
But proud of my Panthers for winning the state championship for the first time ever in baseball. Anyways, Baden, I wanted them to win states. They are seen as a powerhouse in a lot of ways. You can go back and look at their dominance, how many regional titles they have, state Final Four appearances, all that stuff. But they finished state runner-up 1 year ago. And this team, everything that they did when I talked to them and interviewed them, everything they did in the offseason, during the season, every part of their motivation was built on this team finding a way to now go win it. And not just that, they actually, is strong as they've been in baseball year over year, they haven't won a state championship since the 1990s. And so I know it's one thing that meant a lot to that community to try to get it done this year, but Baden's not going anywhere. They're a great program, a great team, and I think certainly capable of winning a state championship very soon. I was disappointed they didn't get it done this year.
And they to me at least felt like the team in the tri-state that had the best chance that was still left on Ohio baseball.
Yeah, I agree. Moeller had two of the top players in the state on their team. They were at the very top, an elite team, but they kind of played with fire a little too much in the playoffs. Obviously, they got bounced. We know the story with that. It was cool to see Lakota West get there and that storyline. But it did feel like, if you had to give me one, Indian Hill obviously lost a heartbreaker as well. But It felt like to me that Baden was the one that was tracking towards the state championship. It's funny how it happens sometimes. You have a team like Licking Valley, who is, let's face it, where I'm from, is from the country, and kind of a up-and-coming school that no one expected to be there out of nowhere. Usually they get there and they do get bounced, and they found a way to win it. So sometimes lightning in a bottle happens in the state tournament.
All right, so it's your first opportunity to make a pick here.
Yes, I already alluded to it. It's got to be Purcell Marion. It's to me, it is their year-over-year dominance. I guess it's kind of a collective. An award for them, a collective award for them, what they've done, a career achievement, if you will, because I don't think we will see, again, the kind of dominance that we have seen from a single program and a single player, even though it was a great team like D. Alexander. I don't think we'll see that again for years to come. So to me, they need to be celebrated for what they've accomplished the last 4 years, and that to me is the most impressive thing this year.
It's both a legacy award and a current, just because, like you said, the wheels have just never stopped moving for them. That obviously concludes the high school portion, but that's just one half of our puzzle here, Brad.
Yeah, and so I'll be very honest. When I was going through the colleges, I kept having to think to myself, I'm like, is this really? I don't have championship teams to pick from.
Right. But it's also a lot, you're going up against everybody in the country. I'm going with states.
Absolutely. So I branched out a little bit. So I have 4. Mm-hmm. I'm going to start off with our honorable mention. And if you want to say, yeah, that's the one, go for it. I have an honorable mention for Xavier men's basketball. And that is simply because they turned a 16-18 season last year, 8th place in the Big East, into a 22-12, tied for 4th. Kind of meeting the expectations from the preseason. The big wild card was St. John's, ending up winning. Beat Texas in the first 4. And then you have Sean Miller leave for the Longhorns. Get Richard Pitino. I think they're in a good spot moving forward still. But in this weird way, I'm like, you have such a turnover. Can it really be that can that really be your year? You know what I mean?
It's going to be a challenge. Richard Pitino has said that to try to build an entirely new roster.
Yes.
But this is also kind of the way the world is now, in college basketball. Texas made a run, in Sean Miller's first year when Texas beat Xavier in the Sweet 16. Texas made that run that year with basically an entire transfer roster, or at least their starting lineup was made out of transfers, I believe, for the most part. So there's a lot of teams that do that. How well do you do in the portal? How well do you do in essentially recruiting transfers? Mm-hmm. And in this new NIL world, now this is not all completed and done yet, but what it means is a program like Xavier, who doesn't have a football program to help with money, is now going to have a chance to have let's say, that this is kind of what it's been drawn up for. It's like a $20 million bucket when Xavier is the biggest athletic program, basketball rather. Xavier basketball is the biggest athletic program at the school. They are going to get a large sum of that money. And Richard Pitino has already talked about how that's going to help Xavier basketball. So you go from a program who, Sean Miller, in some ways, it felt like he left because he didn't have enough NIL money to actually make it work. He wanted to go to a bigger program where he could do that, a la Texas. And so it's interesting now how this is going to play out. Richard Pitino has been seen as a pretty darn good coach. What can he do with a new roster? Can he spend smart money, in a lot of ways, and make it happen? I guess we'll see. But as far as them getting honorable mention, I think it's a good honorable mention. There's some melancholy to it because Xavier fans were so ticked off at Sean Miller leaving, and all of them changed their account to something that had to do with Sean Miller in Texas, so he had no choices for his Twitter handle, X handle. By the way, nice job, Xavier fans. Nice job. So there's melancholy with it, but I think it was cool to see them. They overcame, massive injuries to start the season where they lose a guy for the year. Yes. Zach Fremantle missed his time. Like they overcame a lot and still competed really well in a pretty darn good Big East conference. Maybe not up there with some of the best in college basketball right now, but to me, I think that's in the right spot. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think at this point, if you play UConn twice a year, you're going to have a tough time still, right. At this point.
The top of the league is so good still, and I think it was right that the Big East at least got 4 in the tournament. They only got 3 in the previous year, and so I was glad to see Xavier get in and get a chance, and they did well with their chance. They won the play-in game, competed well for the most part in the first round. It's just their roster was still limited in some ways, so I think it's impressive what they accomplished.
Yeah. And as you talk about transfers, that does set me up for my number 3 pick, which was Miami football. And the big thing that I'll point out is that from 2023 to 2024, they did have a worse record. 11-3 in 2023 to 9-5 last year. But you get a return trip to the MAC championship, which is their first back-to-back appearance since 2003 and 2004. Start off 1-4, win 7 in a row to finish 8-4 at the top of the MAC. And the big story in the offseason was the transfers. When Graham Nicholson, who was the Groza Award-winning kicker, transfers to Alabama. Rashad Amos goes to Ole Miss. Gage Levaden goes to South Carolina. Plenty of transfers into the bigger conference of the SEC, especially with that talk of NIL with those schools that were paying that. But we're still able to keep a bit of dominance in their conference. And to me, they're already making a lot of moves in the offseason. They picked up DeQuan Finn, who was at Toledo and then Baylor.
Very talented quarterback. Great
quarterback. Enjoyed watching him when I was living up in Toledo and paying attention to those games a lot more. I like what Miami is doing with the football program, and it feels like the most consistent of the programs. I mean, I guess it's really between that and UC at this point in the tri-state area. But for you watching Miami and play within the world of college football, do you kind of agree with that they find their spot and keep it moving forward?
Yeah, because you have an extremely rare and unique scenario with Chuck Martin as their head coach. How often do you see a guy just decide to stay at a MAC school this long? That is not a diss on the MAC, but this is kind of how it works, right? You go to a MAC school, you do well, and then you move on. We've even seen that at UC, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And UC is now in the Big 12, and things are different. But there have been plenty of times, and UC fans will tell you, where a coach comes here and then moves up and on. And how much do you have to love a school to want to stay there as long as Chuck Martin? I don't know the answer to that, but Chuck certainly loves the scenario. And then in the new NIL world where he even joked last year about losing his kicker to Alabama and the way that played out. Yeah. He lamented how that played out. He understands that he has limitations, and yet he has decided to stay, and he's done incredibly well there. And so can this be sustained? Absolutely, because Chuck Martin has got things. He's got it rolling now.
Yes.
He has found a way to make it work and win in this world and to compete well in the MAC. And so it's awesome to watch that play out. Miami fans, I'm sure, feel incredibly blessed to have him there. And it's just fun to see. And here's a little insight into what coaches are thinking about right now in this NIL world we live in. When you have a spring game, okay, and you have to think about the way the transfer portal works and the timing, and the NCAA's got to get this fixed. But
yeah,
I know for a fact that I had this conversation with Scott Satterfield at UC about this. He said, we sometimes limit guys in the spring game or don't play a true spring game. It's more like a practice, and it's kind of a little more off the beaten path, closed, less game format, because they are so concerned about a player doing well in the spring game, film getting out there one way or the other, and then there goes that player.
Right.
So that's something that is always at the forefront of the mind of a program like Miami, head coach like Chuck Martin, because even at UC they see that as well. A lot of schools have this. So for him to be able to compete well, understanding that he's going to lose a kicker, for example, to Alabama when he doesn't want to at the wrong time, or something that feels like he's kind of been screwed by that, it's awesome to see him thrive in spite of all of that, and still being able to put together rosters that can compete for championships in the MAC. So it's been fun to watch.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where it's Miami and Toledo, I think, are the two teams that have kept their coaches in the MAC for as long as possible at this point.
The whole Toledo ordeal, I don't know if that's really by design. You know what I mean? Like, Candle's been looking for, or it seems like Candle's been looking for something for a minute.
Candle's been very open about being open to going somewhere else, I feel like. And
whereas with Martin, it hasn't been that. It is loyal to the soil and figure it out.
It doesn't feel like, I mean, when they beat UC a couple of years ago at Nippert Stadium, I don't know if you guys remember seeing this or hearing this, but, he spoke with us post-game, and he basically said, where's the check, and that was his joke. I mean, he does not care. And, a lot of times when a much smaller program, I mean, the Victory Bell rivalry has been a long-standing rivalry, but, usually when a smaller school plays a conference school, Big 12 kind of school, you get a big check, a massive check. And so that's not how it's designed for them in that rivalry, but it was so funny to hear Chuck say that. Where's the check?
Bring me my money.
It's just how he is. It's how he is. And I love that he's like, get on my back, Miami, like, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere. And that's just kind of his mantra. Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, Brad, who's number 2 on your list?
So number 2, I'll say with number 2 and number 1, I've got a little bit of recency bias because we've been talking about them. But for number 2, we stick with the Red Hawks and go with Miami softball.
Yes.
And so they were voted second in the MAC preseason poll. Were able to take care of business against Ohio over 3 games. Finished 1-2 out of the 3 in the MAC tournament. Beat North Carolina in the College World Series regionals. Had 3 all-region players. The coach, Mandy Gardner-Colgate, was a co-coach of the year with Ohio's coach for the MAC, and had 2 all-MAC first-team members. And as we were kind of watching Miami play in the back half of the season, as we kind of started picking it up with the end of baseball, or the end of basketball, excuse me, it just started feeling like they had a groove and a core of great players that they were able to depend on moving forward as they got into playoffs and things like that. And I know you guys haven't covered softball as in depth or anything like that, especially at the college level. But when you see a team rise to the occasion, I think that deserves a little bit of recognition as well.
It does. I would say, because I don't have as much insight on Miami softball, player to player and everything, game to game. But certainly what I would say is, and I don't know if Miami baseball is on this list, but considering what Miami baseball did, getting to a regional, I think it's really cool and exciting to see Miami athletics excel in really an entire calendar sports year.
Yes.
We talked about the football team and what they accomplished, the softball team, what they accomplished. Miami baseball, I think, had been at least a couple of decades since they made a regional. And so it's good for Miami athletics to excel, because sometimes in the Cincinnati market, unless you went to Miami, unless you graduated from there, they don't get as much attention, and they got a lot more attention from us this year than they ever have. Part of that is also the fact that we now have a 5-person sports team, which helps us do a little more. But I think it's so cool to see them do well, because it brings us, even Miami basketball.
I was going to say, because didn't you do a story with the basketball team?
Yes, we did a story with Travis Steele, who's now he's got it rolling there for Miami basketball. So football, basketball competing for a MAC championship, almost making the NCAA tournament. Like, they were right there, right? So from football to basketball to softball to baseball, like, what a year for Miami. And you can see the blueprint for how they can continue to contend across the board. And that only means more of us making that 45 to 50-minute drive up to Oxford and covering them more. And they want more of that, and they have certainly earned that respect this year across the board.
I specifically remember we had some discussion about Miami basketball during a recording, and the next day you tweeted a photo from practice, and I was like, Jeremy heard me. It's not out yet, but Jeremy heard me. And you had to have known.
It was just,
we're on the same wavelength.
What is it? Telekinetic or whatever?
Telekinesis?
Telekinesis.
Yeah.
Is that like lifting things up with your brain?
Telepathy.
Ah, yes.
There we go.
Yeah.
We used all of those things.
We used them all.
Yeah. That's my third grade schooling coming to life here. That was awesome.
We've been around the TV signals too much. They all got on the same wavelength.
Rather unfortunate to drop that just minutes after we celebrated your alma mater, but that's all right.
Thank you, Licking Valley, for my education.
Oh, man.
And you said you don't know if Miami baseball on. I did not put Miami baseball on, but I do have another baseball team, and that is University of Cincinnati. Mm-hmm. Because when you get a Big 12 Player of the Year, when you get 2 All-American nods, the first All-American in about a decade in Carrington Cross, you got to talk about it. And obviously, you guys have plenty of stories. Followed UC as they went on to the regional as well. Same regional as Miami played in. Cross finishes with a 396 batting average, 12 home runs, 50 RBIs, the second highest on-base percentage of a UC player in a season, and the 7th player in school history to earn at least 3 all-conference honors. It's a historic year for him. Even if you get knocked out by Tennessee and Wake Forest in the College World Series, they were 7-4 against ranked teams in the regular season, and and got ranked this year as well. So that was it felt to me like even if it didn't end in a championship, that UC baseball team went above and beyond in a way.
I think we needed something to celebrate with UC athletics in recent history. That's not meant as a dig at UC, but I'm talking about kind of their top level, top earning, top income sports, as you want to say it now, and NIL. Football has underachieved since Luke Fickell left. Obviously, everyone knows that. They moved to the Big 12. It hasn't gone that well under Scott Satterfield for the most part. UC basketball has not made the NCAA tournament since 2019, since Mick Cronin left. And that has been, I don't even know that you could call it a labor of love with Wes Miller right now. It's been exhausting in some ways for UC basketball fans to sit there and think, we have a great roster, everything sets up well, we're ranked early in the season, let's go make the tournament, see what happens, and they just can't get there. And so to me, that's what I love the most about seeing UC baseball get back to the regional for the first time since 2019. And you see the promise and hope in what Jordan Bischel brings as their head coach now, what he's done before on smaller levels. And talking with Jordan Bischel, a lot of this I think was off camera, but he told me, I'm now in a great city in Cincinnati. He's not from here. He's from Wisconsin, but I'm in a great city in Cincinnati. I'm in a great baseball conference. And he said, as long as they'll let me stay here, I'd like to stay here. And you love to hear that as a fan of UC, as a fan of UC baseball, that you have a head coach who loves the city, loves the conference, and wants to stay as long as the AD or the administration will allow him. And certainly he has bought himself some time now getting to a regional and even beating Wake Forest, in their first game. That was so exciting to see that. Yep. And Carrington Cross was such a great story to follow this season. Coach compared him to Ian Happ in the way that he kind of approached the game and changed the game. And, of course, Ian Happ has had a pretty decent Major League Baseball career, one of the most decorated players in UC baseball history, now playing for the Cubs. So it's cool. Carrington Cross, when you talk to him, he's the Big 12 Player of the Year, has some All-American honors and all that. He was like, I'd like for Major League Baseball to work out, but if it doesn't, I have other paths, and other avenues. And so it's weird to talk to him. Some guys are just like, man, this is my all, it's my everything. He just kind of goes about it casually, but also is so darn competitive. He's got that fire inside him, and you see it when you talk to him. So I'm very excited to see where Carrington goes. But yeah, to me, that is the top of the list of local teams in college this year, because I think UC athletics needed a lift, needed a bright spot, and the baseball team delivered that and gave them something to root for, and in some ways gave UC fans a little bit of belief that AD John Cunningham might have made a good hire when Wes Miller and Scott Satterfield have been so questioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was, as you say all that, it gives me flashbacks to when I was going to Purdue, and I was there for the Darrell Hazel tenure for his last 2.5 years basically, and you watch the football team go 2-10 on the season, and you finally get to basketball season. You're like, all right, cool, but having a sport like a baseball or volleyball or soccer that in a major conference can be competitive and bring fans in, I think is huge, not only for the students on campus, but for the alumni and fans around the area as well.
And think about this too, like the Big 12, I think we can all agree is taken a bit of a hit in football because teams are getting cherry picked, and it's becoming Big 10 and SEC. We all get it, right?
Yes. Sure.
So it's been watered down a little, but Big 12 basketball is still way up there, elites. You have a chance to make the tournament by going 500 in the conference and possibly even a little below that because it's been so great. So it affords you that opportunity to make the tournament when you don't have the best overall record. That's the hope for UC basketball. Same thing for baseball now. I mean, the baseball conference is so elite, so good at the top that you have a chance to get so many marquee series wins, and that's why it's a great spot for UC baseball right now, because you don't have to have that incredible overall record. You got to go a little better than 500. You got to have some key wins. You talked about their record against ranked teams, but the Big 12 conference affords you that in baseball, in basketball, probably more than it does in football right now. I think that's really cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I really agree with that as well, where it's Kansas State and Iowa State in football and the rest,
right?
In a way.
Oh yeah, because after that list, I really don't know.
It's not. I guess it's not where it was before. Houston. Houston has been a pretty good program.
I guess UCF still does have Malzahn. No, because Malzahn's gone.
Yeah. Oklahoma State has fallen off.
Yep. Gundy is the wheels.
TCU is
which Sonny Dykes that became
up and down.
Yeah.
It's there's no. I don't think there's any program that you say, okay, they're a top 10 program no matter what. Nope. Usually, always, or at least thought of that way. That's not there anymore. So it's changed in that way a lot. There's a lot of newcomers, a lot of changing. We get it, but to me, it doesn't get the respect that it used to have. And so I think that you still have that in basketball and baseball, and that I think that still is to UC's benefit if they can at least compete to a 500 level in those conferences.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we've wrapped up the season overhaul. I do have one last question for you that has nothing to do with anything we've talked about to this point, because you and I have had a conversation a time or two, and one of the things that I learned about you is that you are very much looking forward to your quiet time, moving out to a bit of a further location from the city, being able to, kind of be more at peace. So how much longer do the good folks of Cincinnati get to have you before you find some woodwork to hide in and probably never be heard from again?
Wow. Tell me you're getting old without telling me you're getting old.
No,
you're trying to make him retire.
You can have 30 more years. I want to know how much longer I get to see you at work.
Well, let's see. Let's be completely transparent. I am 38, turning 39 in a few months. And if I retire around, let's say 64, 65, I don't even know, somewhere in there.
Sure.
I would say Cincinnati could have me for another 25, 26 years. I got to Cincinnati and, in late 2013, so almost 12 years ago, and I, at that time, was like, how can I climb this TV ladder and go national, go to ESPN or, work for whatever, NFL Network, CBS Sports, name your big-time studio hosting job or whatever it looks like, doing highlights somewhere. And I fell in love with Cincinnati. We had a couple of kids who are now 10 and 8, and we just didn't really want to go anywhere. I'm from Ohio, Central Ohio, so I'm not far from home. And so now where I am, I do have those dreams. Like I joked with my wife during COVID when the world was crazy, like, why don't we just move to Montana? Just go out there and, just ride some cattle around. People don't normally ride cattle, but I would.
Yeah. If there's a will, there's a way.
That's right.
Ride cattle, raise horses.
Yeah. Let's what's the song, beer for my horses.
Whiskey for my man, beer for my horses.
Let's do that out there. So, so we actually joked about that, and so I always have that pull, Jackson. I'm from the country,
of course,
and I like it that way. And I am not really a city boy per se, so it's weird. Like if I go to a family reunion or go back home, I'm the city kid. Like no one else is even close to the city, I work in sports. I talk about sports on TV in a decent-sized market covering 3 major teams. And so it's crazy. I do always have that pull and feel of like, let's go to the country in the middle of nowhere and have the wraparound porch and sit and watch the rain. All those thoughts are always in my head. But honestly, like I have it way too good. I'm way more blessed than I ever should be. It's incredible to think about this job. If you go back and tell Jeremy at 17, 18, 19, 20 years old that I would be working in a city like this, covering teams like this, having this kind of a job, I would have said there's no way. So it's, man, what a wonderful place to be. What a wonderful job. And honestly, I tell people this, I'm not kidding. I plan on being here until I retire. And then maybe when I retire, I might be out in the middle of nowhere.
There you go.
Yeah.
So in case you're wondering, he is more Chuck Martin than Jason Candle.
Yes, yes, I've got some Chuck Martin in me,
All right, guys, I got guys going to be like, we just played a great game.
Chuck Martin goes in this like gremlin voice.
I got guys played a great game.
He's like he just rolls, and you're like, what did he just say?
I'm sorry, we booked Jeremy Rauch, not Brent Suter.
By the way, Brent Suter, top 5 favorite athlete in Cincinnati sports right now. I love that guy. Anytime we get to talking about anything Jim Carrey, it's just an absolute it's a riot. I love it.
You guys and your coverage of spring training, always something I look forward to, but specifically the Brent Suter interview, because I know it's going to happen. I'm like, okay, it's time. You got to crank the volume up. You got to lock in because you know it's about to be about 2 minutes of pure gold.
Watch his interviews. We did a story on TJ Friedel gifting some kids from Children's Hospital with a really cool experience at the ballpark. And, you can find it on fox19.com and on my Twitter and all that. But, it was cool because TJ had them come to the ballpark and Topps made individualized baseball cards for the kids. The kids actually signed those cards and gave them to the Red Star players. Anyways, one of the Red Star players that came to that event was Brent Suter. And so I interviewed him about it. And he's telling me a story about how special it was to see the look on the kids' faces. And even as he's telling me that story, he's making Jim Carrey expressions. He cannot help himself. His eyes and his mouth move in almost like a Jim Carrey way when he's telling us stories. Just a normal interview. It could be about a game or about an experience. He is constantly in Jim Carrey mode, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Jeremy, we really do appreciate you coming on, man. This was super fun. Glad that we got to have you in the new room.
This is cool.
This is your debut in the new studio.
I love it. Let's do it again. Like anytime I do a podcast, we always talk about a time frame, and then I end up telling a bunch of dumb stories, and we go way over. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and let's certainly do it again.
Absolutely, man.
That's it. We finished our cycle. You are the home run.
You are.
We got Joe, Gabby Reagan on. Woo! There we go.
I love it.
And as always, you can follow along on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We have the Fox 19 Now Sports feed on those podcast apps where you can catch this show, and then you can also catch the Gold Standard on Friday mornings. And then the video version is on the Fox 19 Sports app and fox19.com, as well as Fox 19 Now YouTube page. And that is everything that we have to plug. So we will see you guys next week. Thank you for joining us.
Have a good one.